Hello class, my name is Tyler and I'll be your instructor for today. Today we'll be covering the Risk Management Plan of Operations. We'll be going over the purpose of the plan, who is responsible for implementation of the plan, and the process of the plan. I will then have you answer a short quiz to see how well you retain the information and to see where you are at. Let's get started with the presentation I've prepared. Alright, so the Risk Management Plan of Operations. So the risk management plan shall apply to all fire department personnel. It is intended to comply with the requirements of the National Fire Protection Association Standard of 1500, Standard on Fire Department Occupational Safety and Health Program. So the purpose of the plan shall reduce risk to personal losses, death, injury, illness, property loss, damage to equipment, apparatus, facilities, legal liabilities, lawsuits from employees and the public. The plan shall address the following issues of risk: administration, facilities, training, vehicle operations, emergency and non-emergency, protective clothing and equipment, operations at emergency incidents, and operations at non-emergency incidents. So who has the responsibility? The fire chief has the responsibility for the implementation and operation of the department's risk management plan. So the process of the risk management plan. So the first process is identification. So identification of potential exposures for all operations, both emergency and non-emergency. This shall include, but is not limited to, the following information: listing of risks to which members are or may be exposed, records of previous accidents, illnesses, injuries, and exposures both locally and nationally, information on potential exposures specific to known hazards in the community, and then facility, apparatus, and equipment inspections. So evaluation. So you have to evaluate the list of exposures using the following criteria. So frequency of occurrence and severity and impact of occurrence. So prioritization. The fire department will prioritize risks based on a risk evaluation. Risks with low or high frequencies or high severity shall be considered high priority and require immediate action. Special attention should be given to low frequency, high severity risks. Training, hazard identification, and sound decision making are critical for successful mitigation of low frequency, high severity risks. So the measures for risk control. So the first measure is avoiding risk. Avoiding the activity creating the risk. This is the ideal method of risk management, and though sometimes not possible in emergency services, can be employed in certain cases. So an example of avoiding risk, the risk being a needle stick from recapping needles. The avoidance, the activity would be avoided by the use of sharp containers. So controlling the risk, using control measures to reduce the likelihood of occurrence and severity. Such control measures include administrative control, engineering control, and personal protective equipment. So an example of this is smoke inhalation, and how you control that is using SCBA or IDLH atmospheres, according to the SOPs. So transferring risk, transferring the risk to someone else. Is the most common method of transferring risk is through insurance. Transferring risk in emergency operations is not always practical, but can be done in certain situations. So an example of that one is the risk being exposure to hazardous materials during cleanup, and how you would transfer that risk is using independent contractors for cleanup. So monitoring the risk management program. So the department's safety and health officer shall along with the Safety and Health Committee, periodically evaluate, at least annually, the risk management plan for effectiveness. Methods of managing new risks shall be developed and implemented. So these may change, like I said, over, periodically, over at least annually, so over a year. So the risk management at emergency operations, so in case of emergencies. So the concept of risk management shall be used on the basis of the following principles. So activities that present a significant risk to the safety of members shall be limited to situations where there is a potential to save endangered lives. Activities that are employed routinely to protect property shall be recognized as inherent risks to the safety of members. Action shall be taken to reduce or avoid these risks. No risk to the safety of members shall be acceptable, and there is no possibility to save lives or property. So at significant incidents or special operations, so the incident commander shall designate qualified personnel with specific authority and responsibility to evaluate hazards and provide directions with respect to the safety of operations. Alright, so now I've prepared a little quiz, it's true or false, to see how well you retain the information. So let's get started with that. So question 1, the risk management plan does not cover legal liabilities. The answer is false. It does cover legal liabilities, like we covered earlier. Alright, next, on to the next question. So question 2, when evaluating frequency of occurrence and severity and impact of occurrence are important. This answer is true. This is the criteria used to evaluate exposure. So question 3. Instructors have the responsibility for the implementation and operation of the department's risk management plan. The answer is false. So the fire chief is the only one who has the responsibility for implementing the operation of the risk management plan. Alright, so question 4. So records of previous accidents, illnesses, injuries, and exposures both locally and nationally are useless when identifying potential exposures. So the answer to that one is false. Records are vital when identifying potential exposure. So yeah, records are super important as far as legal issues. Anything will be tracked back to the records. Was it good record keeping, etc. Alright, so on to question 5. The incident commander is in charge of implementing designated qualified personnel with specific authority and responsibility to evaluate hazards. This is true. The incident commander deploys designated personnel to evaluate hazards and provide direction with respect to the safety of operations. Alright, so question... Oh, there we go. So question 6. Risks with low or high frequencies and high severity shall be considered high priority and require delayed action. You guys probably saw the answer here. So false. So risks with low or high frequencies and high severity shall be considered high priority and require immediate action. Alright, so on to question 7. Personal protective equipment, PPE, is a control measure. The answer to that one is true. So these are the control measures: administrative, engineering, and then, like we said, use of personal protective equipment. Alright. And question 8. So the risk management plan does not cover loss of property. This is false. It does cover the loss of property. And question 9. The most common method of transferring risk Financial is through insurance, and this is true. The most common method of transferring risk is through insurance. Transferring risk in emergency operations is not always practical, but can be done in certain situations. So it kind of just depends on the situation again. Just like having contractors clean up a toxic spill or something. That's something that the blame could be transferred on to another department. All right. So final question, question 10. Activities that present a significant risk to the safety of members shall not be allowed. This is false. Activities that present a significant risk to the safety of members shall be limited to situations where there is a potential to save endangered lives. Alright guys, so that's the end of the presentation. So yeah, that covers the risk management plan of operations. So for your homework, I want you to write me a brief summary of why you think a risk management plan needs to be implemented. Include why it is important and who benefits from it. Not just the fire department, but other people, such as citizens can benefit from it. All right, so that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you very much for your time. Class dismissed.